Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I really regret we didn't get the little dancers to wake everybody up after that wonderful talk of Dirk. But we're gonna try to make this as entertaining and engaging as possible, so you don't need the little dancing girls to be all in it. So we'll be talking today about Doughnut meeting business. And really, it's a talk about how can we make our big shift, a big shift that we need to be making in society. I'll be talking about why we need to make that big shift, and my colleague Erinch is going to be talking about how business can really be at the forefront of that model shift that is awaiting us all. Why do we need to make a change? We are living today in an economy that we have inherited from the 20th century. It is an extractive economy. We take natural resources from our earth. We make stuff out of them. We use that stuff then mostly just once, and then we throw it away. Make, take, use, lose. Make, take, use, lose. It's a linear process. It's happening again and again, and it is pushing us slowly but surely beyond our planetary boundaries. A second inheritance which we have from that 20th century economy is an economy that is almost exclusively focused on economic growth of the gross domestic product, on GDP. The success or the failure of a national government, of an economic system, is measured by only one indicator: whether or not our GDP has grown. Whether or not our economy is a success is because we maximize output and we maximize net profits. But if you have an economy that is exclusively focusing on economic growth without any attention to pre-distribution or redistribution, you will also have only one outcome, and that outcome is economic inequality. It is rising economic inequality, even exploding economic inequality, both within countries and inside countries. And economic inequality, that is something that we as Oxfam actually know quite a lot about. Every year again, we publish a big report around January, the World Economic Forum in Davos, about the state of economic inequality in our world. And this year again, I had to say to all the journalists that since 2020, in this decade that we're living in, we are facing not just rising inequality, but we're facing exponentially rising inequality. In this decade alone, the top 1% of the world has been able to capture 2/3 of all new wealth that was created in our world, which leaves the final third to be divided amongst the rest of us, the 99%. And this is why at Oxfam we talk about the twin crises. The twin crises of that exponentially rising inequality on the one hand and climate crisis on the other hand. They are intrinsically linked to each other because that 1% that I was just talking about, that 1% alone is responsible for a carbon footprint which is the size of the bottom 66% of our global population. They are the ones that are responsible for the causes of the climate crisis. And if you look at the other side of my graph, at the bottom 50% in terms of income in our global population, they are barely responsible for a carbon footprint. Yet, at the same time, they are the ones that are most vulnerable for the consequences of that climate crisis. And this is something that we as Oxfam, we see that every day in our global programs around the world, whether you're talking about an extreme drought in the Sahel countries, or you're talking about a typhoon or a flood in Bangladesh, these are the communities that no longer have the resources, the resilience to rebuild after an extreme weather event caused by climate crisis will hit them. And this is how climate crisis will contribute to rising economic inequality, whereas economic inequality in its turn exacerbates the climate crisis. You cannot separate the two. That means that you cannot fight one without at the same time fighting the other. Every measure that you want to take must take both of these at the same time into account. We must think of alternatives. But then every time when I talk to a politician or usually a man in charge, they tell me, "That's great, Mrs. Smets, but we really think that there is no alternative. It is always Tina, Tina, Tina. Should we perhaps redistribute wealth by reforming the tax system? No, we shouldn't be doing that because we're already paying too many taxes. We have to look at expenditure and go for austerity," and so on and so forth. It is always, there is no alternative. But and this is why we're here together also today, and my organization, we have reached a point that we refuse to believe that there is no alternative. And we feel heartfelt and strongly that as a society, we have to move from Tina to Tamara. There are many alternatives. And not only are there alternatives, they are ready and available. They are being implemented by many among you, by the innovator, by those entrepreneurs that really understand and believe that we can do business differently. They are at the forefront of realizing that big shift. Because if our system, if our economy that we have inherited from the 20th century is no longer suited to help us navigate our 21st century challenges, our rising inequality, our climate crisis, then it's simple. We simply have to choose another system. We have to go for an economy that is fit for purpose, that will help us navigate the challenges of the 21st century. And for me and my organization, and why we're here today to convince you, is that that other system that is fit for purpose is Doughnut Economics. And what is Doughnut Economics? It's a set of economic principles that is quite different from that extractive linear system, but it is circular and it is regenerative. It is a system that is going to measure success not by GDP growth, but by the amount of social rights that we are able to realize as a society without crossing the planetary boundaries in doing so. It is a system that has two boundaries. It has an ecological ceiling, a social fundament. If we as a society, in our way of living, in our way of producing and consuming, we cross that social fundament, and social fundament is everything that we need as a human being to thrive. We need housing, we need food, we need education, we need healthcare, and so on. If we cross that, we will have poverty and shortages. On the other hand, if by our way of living, we cross the ecological ceiling, which is what the planet needs to thrive, then we will make our planet inevitably and on the long run uninhabitable for everyone. Therefore, we must together find a way of living, an economy that can thrive in the edible part of the donut, in the sweet middle. And then, of course, the question is going to be, can I even do a profitable business in that edible part of the donut? And as Oxfam, we're convinced that yes, we can. But I'm going to invite Erinch to also convince you that your business can thrive in the edible part of the donut.
Thank you, Eva. So we have these two boundaries that we must not cross. We have to stay within the planet's boundaries, right? We can't negotiate with this wonderful, miraculous planet. We can't say, oh, let us have a little bit more climate emissions. Let us have a little bit more ocean acidification. We have to stay within that. But at the same time, we don't want to fall below the essentials of life for everyone. So we want to stay between these two boundaries, as Eva outlined. But before I go to my next slide, I'm going to ask all of you a question. Who has taken a selfie here so far today? So raise your hand if you've taken a selfie with some friends. So I'm going to propose to you that this next slide is our collective selfie for all of us as humanity. This is what it looks like. We as humans, as societies, have created a situation where we are in overshoot on the majority of this amazing planet's boundaries, and we are falling short on life's essentials for hundreds of millions of people around the world. This is our selfie. It's a scary selfie. It's an ugly selfie. And it's a selfie that has been partly driven by the world of business. So when we ask ourselves, why has business created this picture for us? Why have economies and governments and financial systems created this picture? Well, what I propose as an explanation is that we have created an economy that is in service to finance. We have created everything to be in service to finance. But it's possible to flip the picture and have finance be in service of the living world and to be in service of society. And when we ask that question of the world of business, actually, it's not rocket science. We know what the right thing to do is. We know that if you're touching the lives of workers or farmers or communities or artisans, that you need to make sure that they are earning more than enough to meet their basic needs, that they have dignity and good working conditions, right? So we have amazing businesses like Creative Handicrafts in India that's achieving this. If we're designing products and selling products, we need to design them in a way that reduces waste, minimizes waste, and is modular and circular so that the products that we've created, that so much energy has gone into, so much material that has gone into, can be recirculated, minimizing the loss of heat and energy and materials. We know that if we are touching nature directly, if we are growing food, if we are taking minerals and resources for its use, well, we have to replenish that. We have to regenerate. We have to work with and within the cycles of the living world. So in agriculture, that means that we are working with regenerative agriculture or agroecology. And of course, as members of society, businesses rely on healthcare, on education for their workers, on peace and security and safety, on infrastructure, all the things that collectively we enjoy. So we need to pay also the fair share of tax. And there are more. There are many other ideas. And here I'm going to pause again for a second and ask you to reflect internally. If you were to think of a business that you know, it might be a business you work with or for. It might be a product that you enjoy. It might be a shop or a business in your community or some other connection. Everyone just think of one business that you know that you are connected to in some way. Now, ask yourself, what are the bold ideas that this business will need to pursue? I'm not going to pick on you to shout it out yet, but I am going to ask you to just reflect in silence for a second. and consider what would it mean business to be in service of the living world and of society. What would that look like? So when we consider these things, and Eva and I have been also discussing these, lots of businesses come to mind. And Eva, why don't I ask you, when I ask that question of the group here, this wonderful gathering of people, what business came to your mind that felt like, wow, okay, that's a bold idea for a company to take forward?
Well, obviously, my first response was, well, Oxfam itself, of course, as an economic actor. But he said, you're cheating. So I had to think about another one. And so what came to my mind was an example like Your Bike, UR Bike. It's a company that's in Anderlecht, which is a difficult place in Brussels to live. And it's like a DHL with bikes. So it's a delivery service. You can call them and they will deliver your products, but they will do so by bikes. And what is even better, it's owned by the people who do the transport themselves. So they have set up their business. They will be the one that make the decisions, and they will also be the one that profit from the business profit itself. So it's a perfect example of a business that applies the donut principles. It has the social fundament, it has the ecological ceiling, and it's right next door, and it's making a profit.
So there are millions of people around the world that are unpacking this kind of question, that are saying, I'm not sure what's happening to my microphone, but I'll keep going. So bear with me, I'll slow down in case that helps. There are people that are thinking, how can communities own their own renewable energy? They're thinking, can there be a way of nature and society being part of the ownership or the governance of a company? They're redesigning new models of business using ideas like steward ownership, post-growth entrepreneurship, hybrid cooperatives, and new forms of employee ownership and community ownership and social enterprise. They're being sparked around the world. But what's critical is that they are doing the actions that the planet needs and society needs. And in able to do that with ambition, these businesses are embodying a different design. So let's take a quick tour of some of the ones that have caught my eye recently. Patagonia recently changed its ownership model so that Earth is its only shareholder. It did this by taking inspiration from an idea called steward ownership. Examples like Richer Sounds and many thousands of businesses have converted to a form of employee or worker ownership. We've had examples like Faith in Nature, this that focuses on ethical, ecological products that said, hey, our board needs to have a representative of nature. So Lawyers for Nature sits on the board of Faith in Nature, directing and shaping its strategies. Examples like Fairbnb have said, hey, we need fair and ecologically sound models of a platform economy in the tourism sector. Examples like Menas del Uruguay or Cafe Direct that are saying, let's create premium and fantastic products, but let's do it so that the profits are going back to the communities that are growing this and that are making these products. And let's set ourselves up as fair trade enterprises. We're seeing a real blossoming currently in the kind of new enterprise designs that are emerging. So what I would like to invite everybody to do as we begin to sort of wrap up, I guess, this discussion and reflect is look at the world of business through the perspective of the deep design of business. And what I mean by that is let's look at 5 key layers of design. Let's look at the purpose. Why does a business exist? Should it exist? Does the world and society need it to exist? What are its products? What's the purpose of its services? So really that core question, what does it exist for? Secondly, It's networks. So it's relationships with its supply chain, with its workers, with governments. Can these be long-term committed relationships? Third, the governance model. So how is power distributed in the company? Let's look at the board, for instance. Who is represented? Is it only finance, or are other stakeholders also part of the mix? And the ownership model. Who owns the company? What does this enable? And what does this hold back? Can we look at new emerging models of ownership that make sure that the business and finance is in service of its broader purpose? And lastly, its relationship to finance. What does finance expect? What kind of returns are enough? What kind of dividends and what kind of exit, what kind of share price is enough? And how does this enable or hold back ambitious action by a company? When we look at these 5 layers of design, what we do is give ourselves permission to design the future of the business world. And we allow ourselves to look at the business world and say, hey, it's not acting in the interests of society and the planet, but we can redesign it, we can restructure it, and we can unlock the actions it needs. And by looking at those 5 layers of design, we can ask ourselves the question, how does the design of yesterday's companies hold back transformative action, and how could a redesign enable transformative action? So you might be going back to a workplace, you might be going back to a community, you might be going back as a consumer, as an investor, as a citizen. And what I urge you to do is open up this question in every sphere that you work in. Ask yourself, who does this business serve? And how can I influence it to be in service of both society and the natural world? I'm going to pause there and hand it back to our hosts for the final questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva, and thank you, Erinch, for sharing a serious masterclass on the Doughnut Economics. That's how I experienced it. It was a serious masterclass. Thank you for all your energy and passion you put into the topic. Maybe I have one more question before we go on a break. You demonstrated a lot of examples, most of the time organizations, companies, if you like Patagonia and among others. But are there like cities, municipalities, maybe countries who embrace the Doughnut economy? I'm very curious whether that's the case or not.
There's cities and there's even whole countries. There's even an alliance of countries that want to embrace these principles. In cities, we actually have a project around the Doughnut economy in our own Brussels, but we also have a major project around it in Amsterdam, not so far away from here. But most impressively, we have the Well-Being Economy Alliance governments. Countries like New Zealand, we can debate whether or not it's a country, but Scotland is one of them, who really wanted to construct their budget, and this is a majorly important message for our upcoming new Belgian government, which we are shaping over the summer period, that they've constructed the budget not around whether or not we make a profit, but around is the well-being of our citizens ensured, by defining what does well-being mean for a New Zealand citizen and constructing the budget around those objectives.
Okay, interesting. And how does that work practically? Imagine that tomorrow the city of Antwerp, of the Stad Breda, of the gemeente Oudenaarde calls you and says, hey, Doughnut Economics, interesting. We want to work on that. What would be the first step?
I'm really waiting for the mayor of Antwerp to do that call to me. And I would love to receive it. But really what it would take is that you first put the necessary people together to define what does well-being mean for you in your city, because it will mean other things in Brussels, in Antwerp, in Amsterdam, in Kenya.
Definitely.
It depends on, you know, what the environment is, what the specific situation is. But jointly together, hopefully with the citizen representation and different stakeholders in that environment, you will define what is it that well-being means for us. And those are the objectives that you're going to construct your policy around, your objectives, and of course, you have to connect them to budget lines. It's not so complicated, you just have to want to do it.
And to add to Eva's point, we're seeing an explosion of cities, neighborhoods, countries where people are coming together and saying, this is our new goal. This is where we need to get to. So how do we change where we are right now? Everywhere from Barbados to Bhutan, across South Africa, across Europe, cities like Barcelona and Leeds in the UK, and here Brussels, Amsterdam, etc. So we're seeing that unlock, but the energy is coming from the ground up. It's coming from local people saying the way we design our economies is a choice. There are other alternatives, and we can get into that much more enjoyable space of designing the future, of being a part of that journey, rather than feeling like a victim of the economy that we can't control.
Wow, interesting. I can imagine it's really interesting as a job, and you can put so much passion and energy in it. We're Thursday today, tomorrow the day after, and the day after there's a big party going on here. But when we think of Monday, yeah, what will be your next endeavor? What is it that you will take as a next step or a next project? Or what's the process you're in right now?
On Monday, I am with business leaders in London who are saying, this is the future. We don't want to just wait for it to happen. We want to build it. And they are getting together to redesign their companies and embrace that regenerative economy, that distributive economy that Eva laid out for us, and redesign their business, because business leaders are realizing that, hey, the way we operate today cannot work in 10 years' time.
Awesome, really awesome. Eva, Erinch, can I thank you for your effort, for your story? Give them a warm hand, Eva. And Erinch, Sahan.